So Leslie Stahl on 60 Minutes does a softball interview with Marjorie Taylor Greene. Let's talk about it in today's video. Hi, I'm Mike Greiner. I'm a lifelong Democratic activist who's concerned about the direction our country is taking. I'm also a lawyer and an academic, and I'm here to help you stand up to the BS of the MAGA crowd. So Leslie Stahl did her softball interview with Marjorie Taylor Greene on 60 Minutes, and if you were like me, you were sitting, watching it, getting sick to your stomach. I couldn't believe the softballs that Leslie Stahl was throwing to this person who's basically a seditionist. But there are actually two moments in the interview that really stood out to me. So rather than reliving the entire interview or sharing with you all the many lies that were said throughout it that Leslie Stahl did not confront her on, I want to just discuss those two moments. So let's talk about that now.
Congress, when I saw the Republicans in Congress, the House and the Senate, completely fail to deliver the agenda that we had all voted for, the reasons why we voted for Donald Trump. It was the
Republicans.
Yep.
Not Joe Biden, not Nancy Pelosi, but the traditional Republicans, who she says failed to rein in federal spending, repeal Obamacare, or fund President Trump's border wall when Republicans controlled both chambers of Congress.
They failed us.
Like who?
Paul Ryan, Mitch McConnell, Lindsey Graham, those types of, Mitt Romney. I'm not even sure why he calls himself a Republican.
Why don't you blame Donald Trump?
Well, I blame all of them for a lot of things. But again,
not him.
Well, the president doesn't control everything.
What? The president doesn't control everything. If I were to watch Fox News for 5 minutes, I'd be convinced that Joe Biden was responsible for the bad weather we've got outside. This is the most ridiculous statement I've ever seen. It just shows Marjorie Taylor Greene is actually a pretty savvy politician that was exemplified by her strong support for Kevin McCarthy, something that led to her getting all kinds of power in the House when so many of her other bomb throwers decided they were going to oppose his candidacy. But what's more is she knows she can't criticize Donald Trump. Trump has a huge amount of supporters at the base. Those people love him. And any Republican can't stand up to him. Just look at what's happening as a result of the indictment and how all the Republicans, including his potential opponents in the Republican primary, are basically running away with their tails between their legs, afraid to say anything that might offend the great Donald Trump. So I love how she's able to kind of move to the side and claim, the president doesn't control everything when it's Donald Trump she's talking about. But ask about Joe Biden, and you're convinced that this guy is running the entire country from top to bottom. Just one more example of the hypocrisy of these Republicans. So now let's take a look at the other moments in the interview that really jumped out at me.
I think apologies are important. Joke about.
We fact-checked before I got to this interview.
Have you fact-checked all my statements from kindergarten through 12th grade and in college, and as I've paid my taxes and never broken a law, and I got a few speeding tickets. Do we need to talk about?
Okay, so basically what's going on here is Leslie Stahl pointed out to her some of the statements that she has made. Things like saying that on social media, Nancy Pelosi should be shot, or attacking the victims of the Parkland massacre. She, of course, denied it, claimed, I didn't know such thing. And then when Leslie Stahl confronts her and says, we fact-checked that, suddenly she's off, shimmying, trying to avoid the question. Let's keep watching.
About those two, because I think where you're going down is the same attacks that people have attacked me with over and over and over.
Well, if this is what you're known for, I think it's good that you're responding to the charges. I think it's a legitimate
because
thing
people
for us to
constantly focus on it, but never focus on anything good about me.
Okay, so I love that exchange because it points to three things about Marjorie Taylor Greene and also three things about the broader MAGA movement in general. The first is she never denies any of that. She never denies when she's confronted with the facts that she actually did the things that she did. When Leslie Stahl confronts her and says, we fact-checked these things, we have these statements that you made, that you're claiming you never made. Suddenly she goes off on some kind of tangent about what a great person she is. She's never committed any crimes. Oh my gosh, you're bringing up all kinds of ridiculous stuff. Maybe you should bring up the 2 traffic tickets I had. That was an interesting response. The thing that it wasn't was actually a response to Leslie Stahl's question. So it's worth noting that she doesn't deny what Leslie Stahl confronted her with. And when she's caught and embarrassed, the first response is kind of to shimmy around and throw out words about what a great person they are. The second thing that we saw her do was engage in bullying. Now that's particularly relevant because of the fact that the MAGA movement is basically nothing more than a bunch of bullies. I mean, this is what Donald Trump does all the time, is try to bully people who disagree with him. Same thing for Marjorie Taylor Greene. Same thing for Lauren Boebert. Same thing for the whole bunch of them. They're a bunch of big bullies. And I was thinking the other day about a movie from my youth, Revenge of the Nerds. Now, I know it's not the greatest movie, and I know that it's kind of silly, and I know that it's really of its time, which was back in the 80s when I saw it when it first came out. But they have a scene at the end that suddenly jumped down to my memory. And what it was suddenly when the bullies who had been making the lives miserable for the nerds suddenly found themselves confronted, it turned out that most people didn't like the bullying. They might have stood by, secretly maybe even laughed and breathed a sigh of relief that it wasn't them who was being targeted. But ultimately, they didn't like it. And I think we're starting to see that reaction, particularly with transgender people. Turns out, most Americans aren't in favor of bullying transgender people. We see this similarly with school librarians. Most Americans, it turns out, are more concerned about censorship than about some ideological agenda that school librarians have. And I think what we're starting to see is this revulsion by people who aren't bullies, who maybe have kind of stood by the side, maybe at one point or another have been bullied themselves. Because guess what? Most people in the country are not bullies, and most people in the country don't like bullies. We may tolerate them because we don't want them to come after us, but ultimately, they're not really the people we want to be hanging out with. And that's who the MAGA crowd is. They're the white Christians who've had power, want to bully everybody around them into submission. Anybody who doesn't look like them or act like them or think like them should be beaten down, especially if you dare to speak out. Well, ultimately, the sense of disgust of most Americans at this behavior is starting to come forward, and we're starting to see that more and more in the elections. The final thing that we saw there that is characteristic of the MAGA movement and Donald Trump is self-pitying. Oh, poor me. I'm Marjorie Taylor Greene. I'm a member of Congress who lies and is never held accountable for it. I'm rich because I inherited a business from my parents. I live in a rich neighborhood, in a rich area with all white people. But yet, poor me, nobody says anything nice about me. Those 3 reactions to Leslie Stahl right there are the MAGA movement in a nutshell. Essentially, when they get caught, they first try to lie their way out of it. Secondly, they try to bully their way out of it. And thirdly, try to paint themselves as being these poor people who are victimized by this aggressive group of woke leftists who want to do something horrible like actually treat everyone with respect. Well, if you want to see another video with Republicans whining about Democrats, oh my God, attacking them, check out this video over here. I'll see you then. In the meantime, let's hope for continued progress. Thank you.